Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Marie. Today I'll be doing my May wrap up. Before I get started, if you're new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below as well as hit the notification bell. But if you're new, hi, hello, I'm Stephanie. I do a lot of bookish content, and today let's talk about all the books that I read for the month of May. To be honest, I felt like May was an okay month, but I actually started a surprising number of books. I managed to read a total number of 16 books, which meant I read a total of 5,317 pages. Out of those 16 books, I read one book that was 2.5 stars, 3 books that were 3 stars, 2 books that were 3.5 stars, and then I read 10 books that were 4 stars. So clearly, as you can tell, the quality was pretty high on the 4-star range, but I would definitely have loved to see more 5-star reads and less so under 3-star reads. So I felt like this month was just an okay reading month overall. The first book I want to talk about is Nothing More to Tell by Karen M. McManus. This book I gave 4 stars. This is by the same author who wrote One of Us is Lying, which I really enjoy, which is why ever since then I've been kind of making sure I keep an eye out for her books, and this is one of her most recent books. It came out last year, August 2022, and this book follows a girl, her name is Bryn, where a couple years ago, I want to say 4 years ago, one of her favorite teachers was found murdered, and the suspects were never charged of anything because they end up having a airtight alibi from one of her friends from way back when. Things happened, she moved away, and now she's back with an undercover mission of exposing what really happened and finding out who the true culprits were now that she has an internship at a true crime place. And now she is just trying to figure out what really happened, kind of reignite her past friendship with the guy who later provided that airtight alibi, and kind of just discover all the secrets, etc. I actually did really enjoy this book. I felt like it wasn't on the same caliber of One of Us is Lying because I actually really enjoyed that thriller. I felt like this book was good, but not in the same sense. It definitely kept me at the edge of my seat. I was very invested in the story. I want to know what was happening. But the reason why I felt like this book didn't deserve a higher rating was because I never felt very connected with Bryn and Tripp, who is the guy. I felt like theirs was more like a friendship, pseudo friendship in a way, and I never felt very invested with their relationship, their dynamics at all, and I felt like that was a core component to the story, which is why I found this book a little bit lacking. The next book I picked up is The Epic Story of Every Living Thing by Deb Coletti. She used to be one of my favorite authors, and then I felt like for many years she kind of went off the radar. I haven't heard any new books from her recently until this one, and I was super psyched to pick it up because I was like, wait, Deb Coletti, I remember from high school years, like wild long time ago. So I was really happy to pick up one of her most recent reads, and this one was actually really freaking interesting. To be honest, this might even be like a 4.5-star read now that I'm thinking back on it. So this book follows a girl, her name is Harper, where she knew from a young age that her father is an unknown person. He is essentially a sperm donor, and for some reason she has now convinced herself that she will never really truly know herself without knowing who he is and knowing more about him. And she's also been pretty big on Instagram, posting a lot of like outdoorsy things, etc. And one day she receives a comment from one of her posts saying, "Hey, you look exactly like my friend." And she's like, who is this person? And that kind of leads her onto a journey finding out that she has multiple siblings, about 43 to be exact, all fathered by the exact same sperm donor. And now she is like, who is this guy? Like, how did he have so many kids? How did everyone use his sperm? You know, like, what is happening here? And as she starts to investigate more about her father, she finds out more about this larger family that she ever knew existed. I found the story to be so fascinating and so riveting because I just can't fathom having 43 fucking siblings, especially when you didn't even know who your father was. Like, you had no idea, and they all look identical, like copy paste kind of people. I just found the book so interesting, guys. Like, if you're looking for an amazing like found family, finding about yourself type of story, this is definitely it. The next book I picked up is Tell Me What Really Happened by Chelsea Sidoti. This book I gave 4 stars. This book follows a group of friends, 5 of them to be exact. One day they go off into the woods, have some sort of like camping trip, and turns out only 4 of them come back because around midnight she vanished. So now everyone's being questioned. This book follows multiple POVs, kind of the aftermath in the morning after they found out that she's gone, and kind of the resulting conclusion of what happened. I was invested with the story. I really want to know what was happening. There's just so many like twists and turns about all the different POVs and just their perspective of what really happened, because they were drinking, some of them were not really awake, you know, just kind of doing different things. So they have very different accounts of what really happened, and I was so fascinated. I felt like the ending was kind of a cop-out though, because it was very much like an out there kind of situation. I can kind of see why this happened, but also at the same time I'm like, it's very far-fetched, you know, which is why I feel like this book only deserves 4 stars. It could have been easily like a higher rating, but if it wasn't for that fact. But if you're still looking for a really good thriller, something keep you at the edge of your seat, very, you know, like unreliable narrators, definitely check out this one. Then this next book I picked up is Daisy Darker, which I gave 4 stars. Clearly I was on a thriller binge because I read a lot of thrillers this month, which was unintentional. But this book basically follows a woman where she's actually meeting her entire family for her grandmother's, I want to say like 60th, 70th, one of those like milestone birthdays, I forget, and they're meeting her for this like birthday dinner gathering, etc. And because her grandmother actually went to some sort of fortune teller telling her that this year is actually her last year, she decides to update her will and announce it to her family during this time period because they're all gathered there. She's like, might as well. Turns out not everyone is very happy with the outcome, but they go to bed, they're like, you know what, let's take a deep breath, figure out what's going to happen, and let's reassess the next day or in the next couple of days. They go to sleep and suddenly they're waken up by a scream because now one of the family members actually found the grandmother dead. And then as the story goes on, with each hour someone else goes missing, and then this main character is just trying to figure out what is really happening, what is going on, who is behind everything. There's just so many questions to be had. I've never read one of her books before, but now I'm really curious because I really enjoyed this book. I felt like the ending was definitely caught me off guard. It's a little bit far-fetched as well, which is why I still only gave it 4 stars. I feel like it could have easily been a 5-star read if it wasn't for that, because if you read this book, you know why I feel like it's a little far-fetched. But once everything was revealed, I kind of like thought back in terms of like if there are any context clues, and I felt like there were a couple clues that were like did explain what was going on, but at the same time, like as a reader, you never would have imagined that. So definitely a far-fetched ending, very unrealistic to be quite honest, but still really fucking fascinating. Then this next book I picked up is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. This one I gave 2.5 stars. By the way, I did read a couple of these books during this vlog, which I'll link above and down below if you want to check that out. I did talk about this book a lot more in detail because I think this is one of the main books I read during that time period. I really did not care much for this book. It basically follows a woman, her name is Jess, where she just graduated from college and she's trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. She ends up moving back to Malaysia to be with her parents, and she starts hearing a voice in her head. At first she's like, I must just be hallucinating, I just be tired, etc. Turns out this voice is actually the voice of her dead grandmother. And due to circumstances, she finds herself as a reluctant medium to one of the local gods there. And as the story progresses, things happen between her and her family, learning more about the family like secrets, the family's relationship with another family, etc. I don't know, I just felt this book was kind of dry and very draggy, and I was not super invested with the story or the characters. I also felt like the tone and like the way how the characters spoke, it was just very jarring. I think it's because I'm not used to like Malaysian slang nor how they talk to each other, because they definitely use words that were like not aligned. Like it was not like constructed in like proper English. Instead, like some of the words were like mixed up, and so I felt like half the time I actually got kind of a headache while reading it because I was like, what is happening here? I need to reread the sentence a couple times to really understand what is happening, because they will add words that were unnecessary. And so as a reader, I was like, why is this word in here? Like, is it doing anything? And the answer to that is no, and that's just how they talk. And it took me a while to really get into that. So because of that, it really took me away from the book, at least for the first like half of the story. So it just took me a very long time to get more invested in the characters and the story. I did find the story overall to be interesting. I just felt like the execution and the dragginess of the plot just kind of off-putting. The next book I picked up is Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. This book I gave 3.5 stars. This book follows a sketch writer for a comedy show. Her name is Sally, where she does not believe in romance in the office, but she always feels like there's always some sort of weird dynamic between a regular dude finding love with a very incredibly hot, successful female celebrity. And she's like, that's a weird dynamic. I don't understand it. How come it's never the other way around? And then as the story progresses, it kind of goes into COVID and about the COVID, you know, realities of the world that we lived in during that time period, which she still kind of live in, by the way. And then she finds herself in her own little romantic scenario with a very hot, very successful male celebrity, and kind of goes into that dynamic. I felt like this book was interesting. I like the concept of the book, but I do feel like the execution was okay of a read. I never felt super invested with the characters. I feel like the romance was just there, but I didn't feel any real chemistry between the two of them, and I felt like the author just put them together as a way to progress the story and put an example to what she was talking about, but that was kind of it. Like, there was no real chemistry or interest between the two characters, at least from my perspective, which is why I only gave this book 3.5 stars. Next book I picked up is Soulmates, which I gave 4 stars. The book was really freaking cute. It follows a girl, her name is Hannah Cho, where she has everything planned out with her perfect boyfriend, but then Nate, her boyfriend, ends up breaking up with her because he felt like they didn't have any common interests, and that included K-pop, K-dramas, etc. And she actually took a long time growing up to get rid of her Korean identity to be more Americanized, and now that everyone's obsessed with Korean culture, she's like actually taken aback and doesn't really understand Korean culture herself because she's taken such an effort to remove herself from that culture that her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, actually took that as a sign that they didn't have anything in common. So now she's trying to figure out what is going on, how to fit in with her Korean identity, how to fit in with her American identity, and then enters her childhood friend that they used to be extremely good friends, best friends, and then something happened where he went off to Korea and ended up becoming a K-drama actor, and because of that incident, they've lost contact. There's also a lot of like misunderstandings between the two of them, and now he's back. And then as the story progresses, they kind of rekindle their friendship and potentially turn into a romantic relationship. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really freaking cute. I love the story, I love the characters. This is definitely a book where I felt like there was actually chemistry between the two main characters and I was thriving in it. I also love that this book took place in San Diego because I've been there a couple times this past year, and so there were definitely a lot of places that I recognized from the book, and I don't know, I just love being able to recognize landmarks and places, etc. There's a lot of like connection. It's more relatable to me in that sense. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. The next book I picked up is Some of It Was Real by Nan Fisher. This book I gave 4 stars. This book follows a psychic where she kind of stumbled upon her psychic abilities, and now she's actually a rising star in the psychic world, helping grieving people reconnect with their lost ones. And then there's also a cynical journalist, his name is Thomas, who's trying to do a pitch of a story where he's trying to highlight some grief vampires, basically highlighting these psychics who are frauds and con men or con women taking advantage of grieving people to reconnect with their loved ones for money. So for some reason, he is dead set on using Sylvie, that's a psychic's name by the way, to be one of his examples in his article, and he's convinced to expose her and essentially resurrect his own career in the meantime. And then of course the two of them have to spend time together because he's convinced that she's doing a bunch of research, she's a fraud, obviously a fake person, and then she's just like, no, I'm not. And the story progresses though, like, it's not a romance for sure, it's definitely more of a journey of finding who you are. Definitely kind of like a mystery element in there as well. I don't know, but like this book took me by surprise because I really haven't heard anyone talk about it, but then I picked it up and I flew through it so fast because I was so invested in the characters. I want to know what was happening. I want to know more about, you know, this like mystery behind Sylvie's past and what led her to become a psychic in the first place. I also want to learn more about Thomas and his reasoning behind doing this expose and what happened to his career. And there's just a lot of elements to this book that I was super fascinated by and very invested in. So if you're looking for all of that, definitely check out this one. Then this next book I picked up is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which I gave 3.5 stars. I was expecting so much from this book, but I feel like this was kind of a disappointing read for me because It's not like I didn't like it, but I expected a lot more. So this book basically follows a girl where her and her village and like the country in general have been sacrificing this young woman every single year to the sea god as a way to hopefully appease him so that he can bring some bountiful harvest, like water, fish, all that stuff, so they can feed the country. And because this year's bridal sacrifice is actually her brother's like true love, she ends up sacrificing herself instead. And then she goes into sea, drowns, and then finds out that not only is the sea god actually just asleep due to some sort of curse, something else is going on. And now she's trying to figure out what is really happening. She is befriending a lot of the other gods and goddesses in the underworld, or like the water underworld. I felt like this premise sounded really fascinating, and some of the characters were really fascinating as well. But I don't know, there was just something about this book that I found very lacking, and I just expected more from it. I don't know why. I feel like I've been reading a lot of like Asian fantasy books recently, and I feel like those were just like super high caliber, and this one was just an okay read. I still really enjoyed the male character though. I thought he was top notch, which is why I still gave this book 3.5 stars, but that was kind of it. The next two books I picked up were from the same series, and that is Barbarians Prize as well as Barbarians Mate. These two books are part of the Ice Planet Barbarian series. Obviously, I gave them book 4 stars. I feel like as of right now, the entire series is a 4-star read. It is purely entertainment value, guys. It is smut. It is fun, and it is just a good time. They're all very short reads too. I think they're almost like 6 hours, 6.5 hours, and since I read them on 2 times the speed, I go through them like that, and I managed to snag both of them this month, even though sometimes it takes like 4 to 6 weeks for the audiobooks to come through on Libby. But I don't know, something happened and they both managed to come through this month, and I was able to just power through them really quickly, and I enjoy them. Like, that's all really is to say about it. I am now reading the next book right now. I'm like halfway through that one, so I'll talk about that in June. But as I said, it's just a fun, good time. The next book I picked up is Vanessa Jarretts' Got a Man by Laquette. I'm really hoping I pronounced that name correctly. This book I gave 4 stars, and I did talk about this book in my Asian book recommendations video, which I'll link above and down below in case you want to check that out. The reason why I included that book is because the main male is actually Korean American, and this book basically follows a woman. Her name is Vanessa, where she's a 40-something divorcee, and she lived, I want to say like 20 years with this very toxic guy. She finally took herself out of the picture, went through some divorce, and because of her very great divorce lawyer, she's actually really wealthy now, and she's just living up her life. And then enters Michael, who is actually a town sheriff, and because of his little sister's impending nuptials with her ex, and because he knows that her ex is bad news, he reaches out to her asking if there's any way for her to placate his younger sister, letting her know what she's about to get into so he doesn't see his sister hurt. And because she doesn't want to see anyone else become a victim of her ex, she decides to play along and do a good deed. And so that's how the two of them end up meeting, and the story progresses. You know, things happen. I really enjoyed this book, guys. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was fun. I really liked the romance. It was sizzling between the two of them for sure. The chemistry was definitely up there, and I just overall really enjoy the story. The next book I picked up is another one I did also recommend for my Asian book recommendations, and that is Meet Me in Mumbai by Sabina Khan. This book I gave 4 stars. I feel like no one has really talked about this book, but I really enjoyed this book. It follows 2 timelines. Well, no, it follows 2 parts. The first part is the mother, who is a teenager at the time, and she ends up having an unexpected pregnancy, and due to circumstances she decides to have the child, but she didn't tell anyone about it, but she ends up adopting the baby out to a family. Now we go on to part 2, where we follow the baby's perspective about 18 years later, and kind of like her identity crisis, knowing that she is obviously adopted. She grew up in a family where they're not the same culture. I believe they are white Americans, and she is obviously Indian, and so she's trying to find more about her cultural identity, learn more about herself, learn more about her biological mother and what really happened. And as the story kind of progresses, you kind of see the two of them, you know, just reconnecting. I mean, that's hence the title of the book, Meet Me in Mumbai. But like, I just felt like the story was incredibly heartwarming and incredibly hard to read at times too, because you're looking at this teenage girl where she felt very abandoned by her family due to the circumstance that she's pregnant, and she couldn't even tell them because she knew how they would act and react to that news. So I definitely felt for her. It was definitely a hard book to read in that sense, but I just love the messages in this book. I love the characters. I love the relationships that both people kind of developed with each other, with their families, and just, you know, overall in general. And I just felt like it was a very heartwarming novel. Next book I picked up is The Dark King by Gina L. Maxwell. This book I gave 3 stars. This was a little bit better than some of the other fantasy romances I've read this year, but it was just an okay read overall. It follows a girl, a woman, her name is Bryn, where she somehow wins this all-inclusive, super exclusive Vegas trip. But after a night of martinis and drinking, she finds herself waking up married to a billionaire. His name is Caden, and he also happens to run most of the city as well as the hotel that she's staying at. Not only that, but her husband is actually Fae royalty. Specifically, he's actually the Dark Fae king of the Night Court. And there's this whole political thing between the Dark Fae and the Light Fae, and for some reason decided to use Bryn as a pawn. And as the story progresses, you learn more about Bryn, and you learn about Caden, you learn about the relationship. Obviously there is a romantic part to it as well. I felt like this book was okay. Like halfway reading it, I was like, should I pick up the sequel? And I think I would be interested in picking up the sequel, because the way how the book ended, I definitely felt intrigued enough to continue. That being said though, I wouldn't cry in my sleep if I didn't pick up the sequel, if that makes any sense. It's very much a like, if I see it, I'll pick it up. If I don't, not a big deal. But overall, I did really enjoy this compared to some of the other fantasy romances I've read out there. For example, Hooked. Then this next book I picked up is The Iron Raven by Julie Kagawa. This is the first book in the Iron Fae Evenfall series. I don't think I'm okay with the series because I felt like it was an okay read. It wasn't amazing. I gave this book 3 stars if I said already, but I just didn't care much for the story. I felt like I was too disconnected with the characters and the plot from the original series to really matter anymore for this one. So while it was still interesting for me to finish off the book, I don't feel invested enough to actually continue on with the series. Then the last and final book I want to talk about is The Picture Bride by Lee Gum Yi. This book I gave 3 stars. This book follows a woman called Willow, where at first in the book she is a young girl that is being sold off to be a picture bride to a random Korean man who has immigrated to Hawaii. The reason why she agreed to this because they gave her 3 promises. One is your husband is a landowner, so she was going to be relatively well off. Food and clothing is so plentiful, it even grows on trees. And the 3rd promise was you'll be able to go to school. However, once she arrives there, she finds out that none of this is true, and she's a little bit heartbroken because of that. But because of circumstances and because of her family, she decides to power through and do what she can out of the situation. And so the story kind of goes through many years, couple decades, where she is trying to survive, have a family, and not only that, but it kind of goes into her family's, her kids' perspectives as well. The reason why I gave this book 3 stars is because I feel like even though this is a type of book that is exactly up my alley, there was something missing about the characters that did not make me feel connected with them. I feel like I'm very much a character-driven reader, so if I don't feel very connected to the characters, especially in a book like this where the characters are just so important, they either make or break the story, it impacts a lot on my reading experience. So because of that, I didn't feel very invested in the story or the plot, but at the same time I understood that the writing is good, the plot is good, the history behind what she went through was good as well, which is why I still give this book 3 stars. But in terms of my own personal enjoyment out of it, it might have been a lesser rating than that, to be quite honest, like maybe even 2 stars. So anyways, those are all the books that I read for the month of May. Like I said already, I feel like this month I read a decent amount, but at the same time I do think the quality was not really up there, so I'm really hoping that June is better. But as I can safely tell you, as of June 6th, that is not the case, mainly because I have been reading this one book for like a week now and I'm still only 1/3 through, so we'll see how that goes. But anyways, let me know down below which books that you read for May, and if you have read any of these books before. If you did, what do you guys think about them? But as always, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up if you subscribe to my channel, and if you see more content of me, please don't hesitate to down below as well as the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.